Located in the heart of northern Salento, a few kilometers from the Ionian Sea, Sava is part of the administrative territory of the province of Taranto and has a population of around 16,000 inhabitants. The characteristic rural landscape extends into a verdant plateau 107 meters above the sea level, framed by the offshoots of the Murge Tarantina. The cultural influence of Magna Graecia has long dominated the customs and traditions of this land. The Paretone or Limitone of the Greeks should instead follow the Byzantine period, an imposing defensive wall section built according to tradition at the time of the Roman Empire in the context of defending the territory from enemy invasions. The noble protagonist of the history of Sava, as the entire landscape heritage, is the fertile countryside. The precious land of Sava has represented a cornerstone of the economy of the rural society that for centuries here has been rooted and distinguished for the production of exquisite first fruits such as wine, oil, figs, and almonds. In this rural landscape, it is easy to encounter typical constructions of peasant architecture, like the Paiari. Similar to the trulli, the Paiari are entirely made of dry stones and rest, as usual, on a circular or polygonal plan. Depending on the practical needs of each family, the characteristics of the site and the availability of material, the Paiari could take on different shapes and sizes and be provided with an oven for baking bread or even a small underground system for water supply. The Sava countryside enjoys the presence of verdant expanses of olive groves. As evidenced by the mighty secular trees, the olive growing tradition of Sava goes back to the most ancient times and began to establish itself with greater continuity in the feudal history of Salento. The oil has marked the social and financial vicissitudes of the inhabitants of Sava, and even today the precious liquid gold is characterized by its high organoleptic quality and the unmistakable authentic taste. The close bond between Sava and its countryside is also evident in the attribution of the meaning of its name. As the scholar Horatio de Sanctis writes, the name Sava derives from the cult of the Greek divinity Sabatio, a sacred figure linked to the must and the grape harvest. The history of Sava is from its origin linked to the production of wine and the cultivation of vines, an agricultural practice that still pervades the entire landscape heritage. Savi's land lends itself well to the production of excellent Primitivo di Manduria grapes, a renowned DOC vine from the Taranto area and known as excellence in the field of enology. In the past, most of the agricultural economy was concentrated within the farms, real small production nucleuses characteristic of the southern Apulian Peninsula. Among the larger complexes, there is Masseria Petrose, equipped with numerous rooms for colonial use and for keeping livestock. Le Petrose also has a chapel dedicated to the Madonna delle Grazie, frescoed and decorated inside according to the stylistic tradition of the territory. The ancient village of Sava is gathered around the ancient feudal palace and the town's mother church, dedicated to Saint John the Baptist. The current urban conformation of the center of Sava came into being at the turn of the 14th and 15th centuries, when the Angevin-Durazzo dynasty sat on the throne of Naples. The expansion and the fortune of Sava will be recorded in the 16th century, together with the feudal successes of the Prato family, an ancient lineage that was known to distinguish in Terra d'Otranto for nobility and wealth. Strolling through the streets of the ancient village, you can immerse yourself in Savi's history to be surprised by the elegance of the city's architecture. In Via Benedetto Croce, we come across the bulk of Palazzo Cinieri, built on 2 floors and dating back to the 17th and 18th centuries. Characterizing is the refined arched portico that shows the main floor of the building, elaborated with style and refinement. There is no lack of surprises linked to spontaneous architecture. Going along Via Fiume, you come across the Subpuerto, so called in the popular vernacular. It is a graceful star vault, part of an ancient building, then demolished to allow the view of the street on Corso Vittorio Emanuele. Moving south of the town, you can visit the city park, the city's green lung. It is named after Police Commissioner Piero Sassi, a Seville citizen and protagonist of numerous and difficult operations linked to the fight against organized crime throughout the Italian territory. Visiting Sava means knowing the authentic side of Puglia and the warm welcome of the people of the south. Here in Sava it is natural to come across those scents and colors that record the spontaneity and genuinity of Salento and the amiability in the smiles of its inhabitants. The building of the baronial palace of Sava, also known as the Castle, is linked to the noble Prato family, which still today, in its monumental forms, is the backdrop to the elegant foreshortening of Piazza San Giovanni, a prestigious architectural salon of the Sava inhabitants. Dating back to the first half of the 16th century, the castle was built by Baron Pompeo Prato as the residence of his family. With the death of the last Baroness, Ippolita Prato, in 1630, the palace entered the property of the Society of Jesus and was extensively remodeled. Following the financial ruin of the noble family, the property was purchased by the municipal administration and transformed in 1884 into a town hall. Recently restored, the baronial palace has returned to its splendid magnificence, still able to characterize and make unique the beautiful historic center of Sava, especially the area of the arcades that overlook the foreshortening of the Spanish Palma Square. Among the various structural changes that took place over the centuries, those made in the 19th century by the Baron Giuseppe De Sinno deserve mention, transforming the semi-underground basement into an oil mill. Today, in these spaces, you can admire the interesting display of the Museum of Oil and Lucerne, a cultural institute promoted by the municipality of Sava and by the association Amici Museo dell'Olio. The finds preserved in the rooms of the museum belong to the wood of the olive oil civilization of Terra d'Otranto, when the olives were squeezed in the hypogeum oil mills to produce a highly prized variety of lamp oil. In fact, most of the oil products produced in Salento were exported throughout the European continent as a lampante variety or as a fuel suitable for public and domestic lighting of lamppost and oil lamps. As a corollary to the tools once used for pressing olives, the museum preserves a vast assortment of oil lamps and lighting fixtures dating back to the time when oil was the main protagonist of the Salento economic scene, but also the essential element to enjoy the lighting. In the heart of the town stands the Calam of San Giovanni, built thanks to the drawings of Luciano Cavaliere and raised in 1895 to replace an older one. Entirely carved in the tuff at the top of the Calam stands the statue of the Baptist, protector of the city. The square is fronted by the Mother Church, dedicated to the patron saint of the village. The building was razed at the end of the 16th century, but changes and reconstructions were made to the structure over time. The austere and linear forms of the facade of the matrix formed a backdrop to the elegant appearance of the bell tower, raised at the end of the 18th century. The bell tower at the top shows off its rounded shapes that recall the Rocaille style. The interior of the Mother Church opens up into a monumental space. The Johannine lamp dominates the triumphal arch of the nave, symbol of St. John the Baptist and ancient weapon of the Universitas of Sava. The side islands of the building were built in the second half of the 18th century during the enlargement of the church, aimed at supporting the demographic growth of the country. Of great value is the altar of the Virgin of the Rosary, built in the second half of the 18th century. The architectural machine is embellished with elegant polychrome marbles that frame the wooden statue of the Madonna, probably of Neapolitan origin. The panels of the Holy Mysteries are painted directly on the marble, while above is the effigy of Saint Oronzo, protector of the ancient province of Terra d'Otranto. Located on Via Roma, the convent church of San Francesco was built to a design by Cosimo Stranieri by Francavilla Fontana. The sober facade, with its neoclassical appeal, is punctuated by tall pilasters, adorned at the top with capitals sculpted in Ionic style. Inside the building, you can admire the monumental structure decorated with Corinthian columns and sculptures executed by Salentinian masters from Galatina and Spoleto. The triumph is a beautiful Carovigno stone worked with mastery and ability. The church was enlarged in 1936 to accommodate the many devotees interested in participating in Franciscan religious services. The Latin cross nave is surmounted by two splendid domes of different diameter and height, decorated with frescoes of remarkable artistic value. Many of the works of art, which also embellish the upper walls and tails to a convent, are attributed to the painters Bocchetti and Falzano. Their mastery makes the sacred place an oasis of prayer. In addition to enjoying an important library, since 2009, the convent of Sava has housed the Chinese Missionary and Natural History Museum. The museum collection, once preserved in Lecce, is composed of important historical pieces pertaining to the Franciscan missions in China and represents the testimony of the evangelical commitment of the minor friars operating in the Asian continent. In the museum rooms, you can admire the fine paintings on silk depicting princes and dignitaries of the Chinese imperial court. The ancient religious culture of the Kingdom of the Middle, which is magnificently illustrated in the pretty decorated and enameled glasses with real expertise, deserves a special mention. The Natural History section is instead composed of donations from the Solomoni and Marcucci families and from the findings of the scientific cabinet of the High School of the Minor Friars of Lecce. In the rooms there are rare geological finds belonging to the context of fossils and minerals. It is also possible to admire shells, corals, specimens of terrestrial and marine fauna. The collection is constantly enriched with donations and collaborations with the University of Salento, the WWF and Legambiente. A few kilometers from the inhabited center of Sava, along the road that leads to Lizzano, we come across the ancient sanctuary of the Virgin of Pasano, a symbolic place of the strong Marian devotion of the Savese people, built thanks to the donations of the believers. The building was raised in March 1732 near a pre-existing church dedicated to the Virgin Mary. The bishops of Oria, particularly linked to the Virgin of Pasano, took care of the church and in particular took an interest in the construction of the new road that connects the sanctuary to the town. The decorative style is very simple and reflects the artistic and essential spontaneity of rural church buildings. However, the inspiration and mastery of the Salento sculpture of 700 is shown in the precious elaborations of the high altar, vivid of picturesque decorations and precious pigments. The sanctuary preserves the stone and the stock of the slave, which testify to the miracle of the Virgin of Pazzano, an event that is recalled every year by the Pro Loco of Sava through the historical parade of the slave. The procession marches through the streets of the town in conjunction with the feast of San Giovanni in the second half of June and ends its journey in the main square in the jubilization of lights and colors in honor of the patron saint. The event, reenacted in historical customs, recalls the miracle that took place during the frequent incursions of the Turks against the province of Terra d'Otranto. In fact, the protagonist of the miracle was a Turkish slave taken prisoner in 1605, when the Terra d'Otranto cavalry freed the city of Taranto from an enemy siege. Ended up as a slave in Sava, prevented from moving by the presence of a large chain passing in front of the ancient chapel of the Virgin of Pazzano, and the slave asked for the grace to be freed to the Virgin, offering his baptism as a pledge. At that moment, a boulder broke the stock, thus freeing the servant, who converted to the Christian religion. On the site of the miracle, a chapel was built, which still preserves the painting depicting the scene of the liberation of the slave.